Okay, so our fourth fellow, Nami Gradoli Hiner, she's coming from Spain, and she's going to present us a very interesting case. It's a mixture of architectural and art project, I would say. It combines different media. That's why we had a problem with presentation. It's usually like that. But this is another contribution to our program, which treats another scale, which is again good because we covered kind of regional scale, city scale, buildings, and even the interiors and exterior. And now you're gonna enjoy, I hope, her presentation.
Yes, first, guys.
Yeah, maybe a few words about
yes.
yourself.
Well, I'm sorry for not having listened to your presentations. You will let me know later. Yes, and yeah, should we introduce ourselves? Okay, so I'm Nami. I'm from Valencia, but I live between Valencia and Barcelona. I'm an architect and researcher, and I also work with film. And, well, let's see if it works. Because I had a PowerPoint, but it was not working. And now let's see if with this we will be going from the PDF to video. Well, so, fine. Okay, so, well, I'm gonna introduce to you the essay that, well, as everyone, that we did for Bina. It's called Staircase Stories. And I did, how do you?
Is that you're selected? Okay.
Scroll down. Okay. Okay. So. Okay. Perfect. So I divided the presentation in two parts. The first one is a bit, I will tell you some of the stories, also a bit the theoretical framework, and to understand how, like, in which spaces these stories take place. And then, so a bit of this. And then, but it's not gonna be like super deep in. If you want, you read it. And the second part is we are, well, going to try very shortly to create a space like it's like we are gonna see like different well, and to understand, sorry, the past of like the context of mass housing, where does it come from, like the typology of ground floor plus 5, then to understand what kind of transformations have been done in these buildings. And then we will make, the last part is like, okay, so a bit more like opening up for imagination, like to think what we could do with this issue. So, well, the first part, for the first part, we need to put a video. Okay. Nice. So this is a bit like an introduction for you to understand the kind of space or city that we are talking about. So we are in Nou Barris, Barcelona, and 67 steps are the steps that Dolores, who is 93 years old, needs to count each time that she wants to go down to the street from her house. Counting is not just a game or like something for fun, but it's a way of measuring like the rhythm, the effort, and knowing like where to make a stop or where to control a bit like the speed. In a block nearby, Isabel, 71 years old, has been living there since the 60s. Her, like before, like everything was fine, no? But her husband had a problem and he lost his mobility, so now he can't go out from his apartment. They live in a fourth floor, and she's like going up with the groceries, like doing everything for him, so she's dealing all the time with the stairs. And she's trying for 4 years to put an elevator, but because of the regulations and the subsidy systems that are only done if you pay first, and then so first you need to pay and then you get it back. So then it already excludes kind of like people that can't afford this first payment, no? So she's maybe thinking of moving out, but she like it's also like not a possibility. So it's a bit. Then close by, Rosa and Rosita, they were neighbors like since the 60s also, but they were not friends. And when their husbands died, they became like super close. They started to go to the court, to the park, like to hang out together a lot. But now, Rosa, that is the woman with the pink coat, or I don't know how to say it, she can't go out anymore, but Rosita is bringing her all the time food, like if she needs something, so at least like they are helping each other. Well, Lydia had to move out from her 5th floor to the ground floor because she's using a wheelchair, and there was like only one step to the street, and her husband did this small wooden ramp for her to be able to go to the street. And thousands of kilometers away in Tbilisi, we find also like some similar stories, like this one of Dodo. Well, this was a video that we are not gonna see. But so she like in the 90s in Tbilisi, the people were expanding their homes, transforming their buildings, but only the ones who had money could afford the elevator. So they, of course, couldn't do it. So she found a way of putting the groceries up, which is like she has a bag, and from the balcony, she puts it up every time. And then the last one is Mirza, who is not able to go out, but she's all the day like in the window, like staring to the neighbors and like waving people. So it's her way to connect with other people that is not in her house. So these stories echo around our cities, not only in Barcelona or Tbilisi, but I think everywhere. I don't know if they feel familiar for you, if you know like someone who is, or a familiar, or I don't know. These stories are real stories gathered through fieldwork and research in Barcelona with this documentary film and architecture project, 67 Steps, and in Tbilisi, that is like a research project that I did with another fellow also that is not here. And it's like I work with film, and this is like a main reference, like doing visual ethnography from Sarah Pink. These stories are intimate stories, very hidden and quiet, and they rarely leave the limit of the facade, like of the building. They are stories that deal with hope and fear, because like fear of falling, fear of being isolated, fear of maybe not being able to move in a few years, but also hope of the care network, that is like the neighbor that brings you something, like also hope that maybe something will be done at some point. And are stories of people that is aging and buildings that also are aging. So people and buildings aging together. And it's gender burden, this reality, because in the end, I don't know, like you realize that all the stories are from women, because in the end, women, at least in Spain and in general, I would say, are the ones who live longer alone and more autonomously. Also are the ones who take care from others, also are normally the ones who take care of the older people, and also the ones who clean, the ones who take care of it, basically. So these stories unfold in 3 scenarios. The first is the street. I have a video, but maybe we are gonna skip the video. But no, because I think it's better to see others, because it was, if it's a lot of time. So in the street, basically, is where as we said, like as I said before, like we all know, where the social interactions happen, no? But when we are walking normally, like around the street, like we walk, but there are like a lot of realities happening at the same space, but in the verticality, no? So we can maybe, normally we don't think about it, but it's like who can access the streets, like because there is, I don't know, I'm explaining it a bit bad, but the second scenario is the staircase, which is the filter that says or allows who can go to the street or who can't access the street. And it's like an invisible infrastructure, which means that when you are able to go up and down, you don't even think about it, if you can move normally. But when you start having like a difficulty of mobility, then you see it more. Or when you do the groceries or in general, but yeah. And then the final one is the home. In this one, I would like to put the video of this one. Okay, so basically, this means that when the stair become a barrier, like isolation can happen, and also that this is not only one case of one story, like this is a structural situation that we find also in historical center and in many other typologies, but in this essay, I'm focusing in mass housing. And for example, 58%, like from these 513 buildings that we analyzed in my master thesis, 58% of these buildings in a mass housing periphery district of Barcelona, they didn't have elevators. So it's like a big issue that to take into account. So then some concepts that you can keep in mind. Misfit, so it's not the body deficit or the body blame, but the mismatch between the body and the environment. Also the capacity contract, like when all this mass housing was built, no one was thinking about how would the bodies evolve, or they, of course, didn't think about the not normative bodies. Then the concept of collective access, which is that the access can't be maintained individually, so, but is maintained by care networks. And this idea of disabled communalism from David Giesen, who proposes that the structure of properties that we have now is like not working if we want to kind of do something about this access, no? So, well, also, just to mention that in the right to adequate housing, it is said that it must be accessible for everyone to access. So it's like a kind of first step to be able to access other rights, like if you can't go out from the house, you are not gonna access to the city. So is the home connected to the city? So yes and no. It's connected through data, through electricity, through water, everything. And then we have the mobility network, like the public transport network, no, that it's accessible, here is free, but it always ends in the facade of the building. So maybe it could be that it can arrive at some point, I don't know, to the street or to the home. This is a bit crazy idea, but I don't know. So yeah, we are gonna go to the second part. So to understand a bit what's the origin of this typology of ground floor plus 5. So basically there was a lot of people coming from the countryside to Barcelona and there, like many cities, no? So at the beginning they were in informal settlements that they auto-constructed, but at some point they said, like Franco, well, he did something good in his life. They said, okay, no, we need to give these people access to an adequate housing. So they started to build these buildings that, since they didn't need elevator, they could really reduce costs also, and they made like the rule that it was until ground floor plus 5 that you could build without elevator. And they had running water, so for the people that were accessing this housing, even if they were like 40 square meters, 35, 50, like for them, it was like palaces back in that day. Well, and there are two typologies in Barcelona, one that is the blocks, and then other that is the islands. Well, this is a gift, but it's not working. That is the islands of buildings. So you see this photo, and suddenly you see this one, which is in Tbilisi. So it's, I don't know if you realize, it's a bit the same. And in Tbilisi, it happened the same. So people was coming from the villages, they started to build. This is, for example, a table from Gostroy that they were saying, for example, for one person, 12 square meters. So it was, depending on the work or the number of familiars, they would give you a house or another. So, yeah. So back in that time, yeah, there was like this myth of the autonomous body that now we see that it was a bit limited. So towards transformation, we are gonna go very fast to some informal transformations in Tbilisi. So as I said, in the 90s, so after everyone living in very small housing, they were saying, okay, no, we like small housing, no elevators. So they were like, okay, now there's no regulation. For 7 years, there was like an empty gap. So they were organizing themselves to maybe make an addition on the facade. Or like also, they found the ones who had the elevator or could afford found the way of maintenance of the elevator through putting coins. So you need to pay every time that you enter, which is a bit also excluding someone. Then in the richer neighborhoods, they would put an elevator in the facade, for example, but not in the more mass housing districts. And for example, this is funny, I put it because I think you have something similar also here in Belgrade, which it was like they would construct like another building on the top of the building. With this, they would put the elevator and maybe renew a bit the building, but in the end, it's like a cake or something like the ones that you have here in the Russian pavilion. And also, they would connect parts, so the limits of the unit of building were a bit blurred, so suddenly new connections appeared in the courtyards, or like everything was like very adapted to the needs and to what people wanted to do in the moment, no? And this is a particularly interesting case, which is not done by the people, but by the Soviet Union, like in the last years, they were realizing that their typologies that they were doing were not enough. So they were trying to make bigger housing, but also, for example, in this case, they had like the 3 towers, which was a established typology, and they put an elevator and connected the 3 of them to solve like the slope, plus also connecting the 3 towers with 1 elevator, which is quite interesting. And then we go to Barcelona. In Barcelona, we had a lot of, well, in Spain in general, a lot of regulation which has also protected of this, because this kind of, like, I don't want to romanticize like the Michel Nevada transformations, because also they are a bit precarious, but just to keep in mind the concept behind it. So this I wanted to say. So in Barcelona, now, so there are like some subsidy systems to transform, but the people can't understand, it's very cryptic, everything. You need to know how to deal with this maze of bureaucracy. So the things that have been done for now is like in some parts they put an elevator, but always case by case. Then in other parts, for example, this is like also the idea of seeing air as a resource, so putting a new, like adding some height to, and then they sell this, and then they put or renew the building. But in general are more like individual solutions. In the more like, from like, well, there is, well, I don't, well, but there is also some attempts of the city hall to try to break this limit for the people to access the subsidy systems, and at least that they can afford like to put 1 single elevator, no? And it's like that the city would pay and act like trust banks, and then they like kind of, they act like banks, yes. And also we have like some urban elevators, which are now like very, like it's something that is being done a lot. So they would put like mechanical stairs or elevators to connect like hilly neighborhoods with like the flat part of the city. And then I also wanted to mention that I think you would know, but I don't know if you know about the cooperative housing models. I think everyone knows now. But cooperative housing plus also collective housing, like social housing, like it's all orientated in new construction, no? So maybe with all these ideas, we could try to mix and maybe think if this could be, I don't know, with this, like, no, maybe like we could start hybridizing models, like to use, well, yes, I don't know if you understand me. And so here we are making the point. So to build this kind of collective infrastructure of connection, and to bring back like this idea of the disabled communalism, the thing is like maybe we need to blur the limits of property, seeing, for example, this is an island of buildings, but seeing everything as a unit. And if everyone has the same issue, for example, in this island, only 1 building had elevator, no? So maybe the idea would be, I don't know if it's visible because it's very small, but the idea would be to try to connect buildings and maybe even like to pay it, so adding some floors, maybe having a social housing on the top, so it kind of, it's like a public infrastructure, or I don't know. Like this is like just some ideas. It's not something like there's not an answer, but I think that it's important that we start to think a bit about it. And yeah, well, there is like this video. Okay, well.
Perhaps the future is just about new construction. It may be about reading, repairing, connecting, and reimagining what already exists.
understood what it said, but so the idea is like, it's like the last part of a teaser of one thing of Tbilisi, but the idea is like now we all know that demolition is not a possibility, no? Like we don't want it. So we need to start like thinking not only in terms of energy efficiency, which of course should be taken into account to like transform buildings through the lens of accessibility, but to put also like mobility and body experience also in the center, not only the economical, yes. Yes. And yes, yeah, this is the super last one. So yes, maybe at some point, if we start imagining and we make a point which is gonna, it's a bit difficult because it's a very overwhelming also situation, but maybe at some point, maybe she would leave to take a platform between buildings and maybe meet the others and go to the street together. And yes, that's the final thing. Sorry if it was a bit long. And yes.
So in spite technical problems, I think this was really good presentation and very comprehensive research. That's why your theme is very important for someone who is aging, like me. Maybe you don't understand that because you're still young, but actually aging is one of the, let's say, top problems in contemporary cities, and it will become even more. So that's why these solutions are important. So we have just, 15 minutes, so we can have maybe a few more questions. If any, yes, please. Yeah, maybe.
Well, okay. Thank you all for the presentations. It was really, perfect. I have a few questions for the last presenter and the previous group because I didn't get the time to ask something. For the last presenter, I actually wanted to ask, how did you get the residents to participate and to film them? Because it's a really intimate and private atmosphere. And I really like this ethnographic approach, but it often seems like inapproachable for me. So I just wanted to get some insights of how to get people to cooperate. And for the previous group, I want to ask everything now in case I forget. I was wondering, you were discussing the urban heat as a problem, and it is also a growing concern by night. So maybe did you discuss which of the interventions and techniques or principles could be applicable to daytime versus the nighttime? Because I think this distinction should be made. And even regarding the open public space, since some specific vulnerable public, social groups are being targeted, like night workers or immigrants living on the street and what's so not. So yeah, this is something that I wanted to ask. And for the first presenter, I just want to thank you for everything. It was pretty clear, so I don't know what to ask. It would be like just an extra. So that's it.
I will play? Okay. Okay, so you need to take into account that the films or the extracts of the film that I was showing, this was done like it was a long process. So we did the master thesis, then we started meeting people, then we went, like this was in 2022, then in 2023 we started the documentary film, and we met a lot of people, and with these women, we were filming first with the phone, then with the handycam, then with the team. It was not like one day I arrive and this woman is showing me her, no. It takes time, but I think that the way that people were kind of interested is because it's a reality that is touching them a lot, and also that they feel very like individual. So it was also interesting for them to meet other women, because I didn't explain, but like the idea is that it's still doing the documentary film. So the idea is that they will meet at some point. And yeah, like I think as they sometimes take for granted that they won't have elevator, so at least that they can help for others to have. That's what some of them say. And yeah, like, yeah, also for them is interesting because maybe they learn how to film, or they, I don't know, they feel seen. So yeah, that's a bit.
Thank you.
I've been observing Nami. We've been in Sarajevo a few weeks back, and she was approaching inhabitants of another building that we are documenting. And I can say the key is persistency and kindness. Just knocking on the door and engaging with them. It was a very nice observation. So it's, I think, kindness and ambition. To our question, that's a good question. And you don't have to rephrase it. I think I remember it was about night and day, and how that.
Yeah, I think in our analysis we were thinking about the different scales, and then we came across the different seasons and this adaptive model that we were kind of in favor, that there's different scales and different options of like techniques or methods, and we would approach the body, but also the building, but also the public space, depending on the season, the time of the day, and the region. But as we see in the amount of air conditionings that are distributed all over the world, which is uneven, this also applies to the building scale or the public space or the body. I mean, there's always like more and less priorities, which is also, of course, a big problem.
And one answer could be, on one of the projects we showed the thermal mass solution, which would kind of give heat during the night that it would store from the day, so that would directly be an option, which is inspired by vernacular architecture. So I guess there is something we should look back in history and look at vernacular architecture and low-tech solution to find a bridge there. Thank you for the.
I would also like to add one point, because this is very interesting, the difference between night and day. And you also mentioned it in the presentation when you talked about evaporative cooling, which is a technique, like a very common technique in the vernacular architecture in the Middle East, because of the difference between night and day. So usually, like, one of the evaporative cooling strategies is used through like night. And there is like their very famous wind towers, like Malkaf, it's called in Arabic, but it's very common also like in Iran and in the Middle East, where you usually also like use the wind, or at least like the cooling air at night, to use it also like in winter. And also like, you know, like mentioned the thermal mass, which is also like a very also like common strategy to use on our architectural scale.
Just to react on this, very nice that we have you here, Walaa. That helps a lot. And we've been also with one LINA member in Tallinn. We've been invited to make a public intervention, and we've exactly looking into wind towers and how to, like, could they be interpreted in recent times and help?
They're actually used now in some contemporary projects in Mazda, because they're quite popular and efficient, obviously, since they're so applicable. Okay, any more questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi. I also wanted to thank you all for your presentations. It was really interesting. I'm a second-year architecture student, so excuse me if I'm maybe not as professional. I had a question for Walaa, actually. You mentioned the Belgrade waterfront, and that's definitely a critical, risky area to talk about here. what do you think? How can we implement some of your strategies? How can we encourage people to and maybe spread awareness on sharing some of your research? And how can we encourage people to actually start treating rivers like living beings and maybe, I don't know, treat the areas around rivers more accordingly, and what are some first steps to take?
Thank you for the question. I'm not very familiar with Belgrade actually, and I was just like, when I was like, I just like came 3 days ago, and I had 2 visits here in Belgrade to the riverfront. I went to Zemon, or Zimon, I don't know how you pronounce it, and also the waterfront Belgrade project, like the main one on the Sava River. I think like also like because I was wondering like, of course there is like, it's a very controversial also like how it's implemented, and how even like how you don't have access to water in the waterfront Belgrade project, and how also like you kind of like, for me was the river like from a personal experience, it's just like kind of like a background actually. Maybe looking at Simon, I had a different experience. The river was more approachable. I think what we need to build on is this kind of like personal experience. And this kind of like personal connection to the river, to the city. And I think as architects, it's very important for us to acknowledge that the importance of interdisciplinarity in thinking of the city, not to only focus on the architecture scale, like on just like the building or just kind of the technical side, because also like in my work, for example, I work with technicalities like the most. Maybe like I use water also, but it's more kind of like a resource than just like understanding the connections. So I think one of the strategies is more to get connected with the river, and more like having more activities, and also like as architects first try to also like kind of acknowledge the ecological continuity as part of the also of our thinking, of our approach as architects. Which is also like not very kind of like straightforward, you know, because it's not easy, like because our also like kind of like our kind of mind setting is kind of like toward to be very specific with having like one specific like specialty, let's say. For example, like I had my master's in environmental design, and I was talking about the environment, I was learning about the environment, but it's more kind of like from the technical part, which disregards the social and the political aspects. And for us as architects, we usually kind of like, we overlook this aspects. And for us, like, it's not like we deal with the drawings, with visuals, we like with more kind of like data. Also like as engineers, like you deal with numbers, you don't deal with like concepts, with theories. And I think this is important first, to just like kind of like acknowledge that we need this, also like this knowledge, and try to integrate it together, also like as an architect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, I would like to thank you, first the audience, and then of course our guests and our fellows. I really enjoyed working with you. I hope we're going to continue that in some other ways, and I wish you best of luck in your future endeavors. Even though you're not into future studies, I'm sure you're going to advance well. Basically, now we have just a few minutes, so we can conclude our event. And thank you for coming. And of course, special thanks goes to the whole BINA team and LINA project, which we are members of. Thank you very much.